6 Kilo class diesel submarines to Vietnam, worth a total of $3.2 billion, is the largest deal in the history of Russian exports of naval equipment. In other words, Russia is arming an apparent adversary of China in the area. South China Sea, Russia is taking a larger view on Southeast Asian affairs. Will sell 6 Kilo class submarines to Vietnam, according to Global Times. Imagine, $3.2 billion for submarines alone for Vietnam. A far-flung strategy unfolds from Washington to Mumbai to Tokyo to the South China Sea. Vice President Joe Biden addressed the crew of USS Freedom. This is the littoral combat ship, first in the new class of US Navy ships based in Singapore on July 27, 2013, and his message was this: I state without apology that we are a Pacific power. America is a Pacific resident power, and we will remain so. The truth of the matter is our resident power status is the reason why this area of the world is able to grow and be stable. Our mere presence in the Pacific is in and of itself the basis upon which stability of the region is built. You are the glue that holds all of this together. US-China and an unthinkable war. The specter of economic doomsday makes war between China and the United States as unthinkable as fear of nuclear doomsday made Soviet-US war. Or does it? In fact, Chinese and American military planners are thinking in exquisite detail as they are expected to do about how to win such a conflict. The problem is that the specific plans being conducted could make hostilities less unthinkable, and two great powers with every reason to avoid war could find themselves in one. Report: US Senate is into the picture, adopts a resolution slamming China over the West Philippine Sea dispute. The Senate came out with a resolution on July 29, and I quote, "The Senate condemns the use of coercion threats or force by naval, maritime security, or fishing vessels and military or civilian aircraft in the South China Sea and the East China Sea to assert disputed maritime or territorial claims or alter the status quo." That is in the resolution. And it continues, whereas in recent years there have been numerous dangerous and destabilizing incidents in this region, including Chinese vessels barricading the entrance to the Scarborough Shoal in April 2012, and since May 8, 2013, Chinese naval and marine surveillance ships maintaining a regular presence in waters around the second Thomas Shoal, located approximately 105 nautical miles northwest of the Philippine island of Palawan. That was contained in the resolution. And of course, China responded immediately. China slams US resolution on Southeast China Sea disputes. Beijing, China on Thursday said it opposes the US Senate resolution disputes in the East China Sea and South China Sea as it wrongly blamed the country disregarding facts. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Chun Ying said the resolution places blame on the Chinese side without regard for history and facts, sending a wrong message. Now let's talk about Japan. Japan could be a main player in Asian conflict. And this is according to the defense minister, which announced and warned that China is seeking to exploit difficulties between allies. The comments by Defense Minister of Japan, Itsuno Onodera, who said Japan needs new equipment and must reconfigure its defense, comes as Tokyo is embroiled in an ongoing spat with Beijing over disputed territory that has sparked warnings of a possible armed skirmish. The crisis that Japan faces today now may lead to situations in which the country may have to be involved as a main player, according to the Japanese defense minister. Before, it was expected that Japan would only be part of a group, in apparent reference to the US-Japan Security Alliance, or that conflict might occur only in areas surrounding the country, he said. And now, Prime Minister Abe has been talking about Asia's democratic security diamond. As early as December 2012, last year, the Prime Minister of Japan said, and I quote, "I envisage a strategy whereby Australia, India, Japan and the U.S. state of Hawaii form a diamond to safeguard the maritime commons stretching from the Indian Ocean region to the Western Pacific. And this is what Prime Minister Abe stressed: I am prepared to invest to the greatest possible extent Japan's capabilities in this security diamond. Aquino Abe vow common stand versus China. President Aquino announced, we reviewed after the meeting, his meeting with the Prime Minister Abe, we reviewed the security challenges that confront our nations and pledged to cooperate in advancing our common advocacy for responsible action from international players. In their statements, however, neither President Aquino nor Abe mentioned China by name. And he thanked Japan for building 10 multi-purpose response vessels for the Philippine Coast Guard. Philippines expects to get 10 Japanese patrol boats. And then another headline, Japan won't be bullied by China. And this was on the occasion of their launching of its largest warship since World War II, which is considered a good news among Americans who still place value on the thought of a free world guaranteed by the United States and its allies. According to the Associated Press, the new vessel is named Izumo, after the mythical location where the gods landed in Japanese mythology, and features a flat deck that bears a remarkable resemblance to that of an aircraft carrier. The deck is 820 feet long and will hold 14 helicopters or a light number of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. The Japanese say the ship is to be part of the nation's anti-submarine warfare and border surveillance efforts, and they call it a destroyer. This is how this destroyer looks like. Japan's giant new destroyer sends a clear message to China and the world. And according to the news, some experts believe that the new Japanese ship could potentially be used in the future to launch fighter jets or other aircraft that have the ability to take off vertically. That would be a departure for Japan, which is one of the best equipped and best trained naval forces in the Pacific, but which has not sought to build aircraft carriers of its own because of constitutional restrictions that limit its military forces to a defensive role. And of course, China appears to be freaked out over Japan's new flat-top destroyer. The ship is designed to carry several helicopters. It can be fitted with vertical lift-off F-35Bs, and it's also worth mentioning that ships like the Izumo can be retrofitted for linear takeoff fighter jets should the need arise. China's defense ministry immediately calls for international vigilance against Japan's military plans. China's defense ministry today unveiled a report calling for international vigilance over Japan's plan to beef up military security, as also the possible acquisition of the ability to hit enemy bases. It would appear from here that as far as China is concerned, it's okay for them to build up militarily, but it's not okay for the other countries to build up militarily. Vietnam. Vietnam's leader promises Beijing's South China Sea claims. Vietnam's President Trong Tan Sang accused China of making groundless claims of ownership of the vast South China Sea, saying the Philippines has the right to question the claims of the United Nations. And he is quoted as follows: the position of Vietnam is we will always oppose the 9-dash line of China because it's a groundless claim, legally and practically, the Vietnamese leader said. And that is the reason why Philippines, Vietnam agreed to cooperate in maritime disputes with China in a meeting between their foreign minister as well as our own Secretary of Foreign Affairs. And not only that, their own Manila agrees to enhance defense ties with Vietnam. Manila agrees to enhance defense ties with Vietnam in a meeting between our own Secretary of Defense and their own defense minister. During their meeting, Philippine Defense Secretary Voltaire Gasmin and the visiting Vietnamese defense minister who visited Manila, and this was in August, assessed joint activities in defense and military establishment and explored cooperation initiatives. India, a giant in the vicinity. How powerful is it? 2 aircraft carriers, 9 Kilo class submarines, 1 Akula class nuclear submarine, 9 stealth frigates. And in fact, they recently launched their own indigenous aircraft carrier, so that eventually they're going to become a member of an exclusive club that can design and build their own aircraft carrier. And this club right now has the US, the UK, Russia, and France as members. Australia, 8 Anzac class frigates and 4 Adelaide class frigates, 6 Collins class submarines. And they made this very strong statement: Australian Navy to protect sea lanes to China, Japan, and South Korea. Protecting the massive resources projects in Northern and Western Australia and export supply lines to China, Japan, and South Korea will be a major defense priority for the Abbott government, the new government of Australia. New Defense Minister David Johnson said last night that this was one reason the Navy needed highly capable long-range submarines to complement its surface warships. And of course, a recent report out of APEC Indonesia 2013, US, Japan, and Australia trilateral statement on maritime disputes seen as targeting China. A joint statement by the US, Japan, and Australia opposing coercive unilateral actions in East China Sea territorial disputes is being seen as aimed squarely at Beijing. The 3 countries opposed any coercive unilateral actions that would change the status quo in the East China Sea. And the statement also affirmed the importance of peace and stability, respect for international law, unimpeded trade, and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. China warns, and China immediately responded. China warns US, Japan, Australia not to gang up in sea disputes. And you will see here vessels from the China Maritime Surveillance and the Japan Coast Guard are seen near disputed islands called Senkaku in Japan and Jiaoyu in China. China said on Monday, and this is only last Monday, that the US, Australia, and Japan should not use their alliance as an excuse to intervene in territorial disputes in the East China Sea or the South China Sea, and urged them to refrain from inflaming regional tensions. The US, Japan, and Australia are allies, according to China, but this should not become an excuse to interfere in territorial disputes. Otherwise, it will only make the problems more complicated and harm the interests of all parties. And China urged the relevant countries to respect facts, distinguish right from wrong, be cautious, and stop all words and deeds that are not beneficial to the proper handling of the issue and undermine regional stability. And only last October 9, another news coming from India. India, Vietnam to strengthen defense ties. India and Vietnam will be on the road to further consolidate their defense ties with the addition of a 4th pillar by the time Vietnamese Communist Party General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong visits India next month, said diplomatic sources. Security ties between the 2 countries have always been close, but they began accelerating in the field of defense 2 years ago when the Chinese objected to Vietnam inviting India to prospect for oil in a contested portion of the South China Sea. Since then, New Delhi has overcome its own inhibitions and agreed to partner with Vietnam in areas of submarine and fighter aircraft training and transfer of medium-sized warships. The 2 countries have also been making gestures signaling proximity. Indian warships visited Nha Trang port, located near the strategic Cam Ranh Bay. Now let's talk about the Philippine external defense realignment. And I would like to add my own thoughts to this, in addition to what is now being proposed by the Department of National Defense. Use asymmetric warfare strategy, anti-access, area denial. We cannot match a military power, frigate for frigate, or fighter plane for fighter plane. But we can easily afford a few hundred cruise missiles to target intruders in our exclusive economic zone. Propose defense assets land-based supersonic cruise missiles, like for example,